7:01, so Douglas Finance Committee called to order on February 8th, right?
Yep.
2022, and let's just, first we'll start with you people Zooming, if you just identify yourself so we can see who's here. So Phil, why don't you start, just say your name.
Phil Landry, FinCom.
Joel Godlewski, FinCom.
Heather Moran, FinCom.
And Missouri Finance Committee.
Dick Vandenberg, FinCom.
Howard D'Amico, Finance Committee.
Sandy Kuipers, FinCom.
We have our quorum, and so welcome everybody, and those of you watching us at home, welcome. It's either us or curling, I know, so. All right, we have the Chief of Police with us. Nick, you want to approach the microphone? You can take your mask off if you want, so we can hear better. And who's your?
This is Lieutenant Travis School.
Travis, welcome. Hi, Gene.
Hi, how are you?
Does everybody have a copy of the document that Gene sent out?
Yep. So
If I
we've,
could have one, I left
I'll
it
take
on
an
the printer
extra
at
one.
work.
Yep.
Thank you.
Matt, you all set?
Can I have a copy?
so as we begin, so Nick, the assumption is, I think we've all read it over, so why don't you do a couple things. First of all, as you were preparing the budget, what were a couple things you were most interested in or concerned about? Why don't you do that first?
Okay.
And then walk us through some of the highlights, okay?
Sure. I did watch your last meeting. I did see where your board was talking about 2.5%, talking some numbers, talking about, well, put what you need in there, come in, see what happens. So I think that's what I did. I looked at where I was, where we are this year, midway through the year, where we are on spending. And you'll see I have a couple, the police department budget we talked about last year is basically three parts: salaries, expenses, and cruisers. So we don't have to worry about cruisers this year because it's not our year for turnaround. We start worrying about that again in FY24. We're on the schedule to do 2, 2, and 2 over 3 years. So there's no cruises including in this budget. So there's no big increase there. In all the salary line items, there's 8 line items total in salaries. Those are all controlled by contract. Those are all contractual numbers, so there's not a lot of hard work there. I mean, it is what it is. You take the numbers from this year, you go to the contract, you see the step chart and whatever the percentages were, and you figure it out. So the difference that you'll see, probably the biggest difference you'll see in my salary side, if you go down to part-time wages. Last year, I believe.
Okay, what page is that?
That is page 2.
2, got it, okay.
So on page 2, last year part-time wages was, I believe, $59,800, and the overtime was about 123,000. Now, the reason for the change there is that last year the state of Massachusetts passed the police reform law, which is going to limit the amount of part-time officers that we're going to have available in the state and available to work. There was a time where we had 6 to 8 part-time officers that could cover almost 300 shifts a year, and we had it in that part-time line item. With the police reform, the part-time officers are going to go away. Right now,
Go away?
Yeah, you're either going to be a full-time certified officer, go through a full-time police academy. Over this next 3 years, they're doing what's called the Bridge Academy. Part of the police reform law is that every police officer in Massachusetts is going to have the same amount of training. So the ones who were part-time certified prior to the change, they're doing what's called the Bridge Academy, where they're able to make up over the next 3 years what they lacked in training. So these people are going to be full-time certified officers, and they're going to get full-time jobs if they want them. So right now I have 4 part-time officers Two of them, one of them is full-time academy trained. He used to work for us full-time. He has his own business. Another one is a full-time officer in another community. And the other two that I have are eventually, probably within the next year, going to be full-time for us. So they're going to come on board full-time. So that leaves me with 2 part-time officers. So that cuts some of that money out of there, but it also increases our overtime because we're not allowed to use part-time officers like we used to use them. And anybody who even comes on out of the full-time academy and starts, just for an example, you could have a younger person who's just starting out, goes to the full-time academy, doesn't have a full-time job, but wants to start out here part-time. He or she is going to have the opportunity to go to another department when a full-time position opens up, because now they don't have to invest in that person. They're already full-time academy trained, they were working part-time, they have some experience, they're going to be sought after. So,
Is it hard to budget what overtime will be?
I'm sorry,
Is it hard to budget what you think overtime will cost? Or has that been pretty predictable?
well, the way I did this is I went back a year and saw where we were at and how many hours that we're actually averaging. So what I did with this, the first 6 months of this year, right through December, I'm at about $70,000 in overtime. So what I did is I basically timed that by 2,
Yeah.
which brings you to 140, and then I times it by 2%, which is the COLA that they're getting. So ballpark, I'm going to be right in the area. But it is really hard to gauge because you can have some years that are lower, and then depending on what happens with court cases, investigation, like when COVID was active and the courts were shut down, our court time dropped drastically, right? So there wasn't as much court time, but people were out. So you had to backfill some of those shifts. And again, even this year, when the part-timers weren't as accessible to us, we ended up using we're using more overtime to fill those shifts when we need to. So in the salary side, that's the biggest change that you'll see.
Okay. Just stop a minute there. Any of you guys Zooming have any questions for the chief at this point? Okay, if you do, okay, Phil?
Yeah, so the only thing I wanted to start out with was the, I guess maybe someone quoting us the numbers that got final approved on last year's budget. Again, we don't have that Excel sheet available to look year to year right now. Coming up to speed with it. So if you could take a look at like police salaries, you're saying it's 1.7 right now.
Yep.
What was the number last year
If-
budget?
Phil, if you go to page 5 on that document, I don't know if you have it, it's got the Douglas Police patch on the front.
Yeah, I have the one that was just sent to us.
Okay, so on page 5, you'll see on the last page, there's a FY22 and a FY23 comparison chart at the
Okay.
bottom.
Yeah, thank you. All right, my bad.
So that total police salary bottom line number, that 1675753, that was last year's bottom line number. And
Okay.
the increase to this year that I'm looking for based on the contractual obligations and the increase in the overtime is the 1727442.
And what kind of percentage increase do you think does that one add up to without me going into?
It's got to be right around 2%. The contract calls for a 2% increase in salaries, and there's probably 3 that I have that get a step increase also halfway through the year, but they're budgeted at the highest year step. So they might have 32 weeks at one step, and then when they have their anniversary, it goes up to the next step. I budget it at the highest step for the year.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you said this percent or 2 is the contractually required set up already, so you're already agreed to everything.
Yeah, there's a contract in full effect for the next 2 years, and this year calls for a 2% increase.
All right, that's my question on the salaries, I think, right? You're
Okay.
going over the expenses in a little bit, or are you?
Yeah, I'll hit on those, but if you look on page 3, it'll give you every category in the salary line item, the 8 categories,
Yep.
and it will specify all of those numbers. And I was just going to say, the full-time dispatch personnel, they're not on a contract. They fall under the personal bylaw compensation plan. So what I have in my budget is an estimated per that chart, which calls for a 2% increase in the step. So those could, depending on what the compensation chart is voted on at town meeting, those could go up a little bit, or they could go down, depending on what the selectmen decide to do with that.
I have a question, Chief. When the police officers go out to, like work at National Grid, and they have to be out there and stuff, now, does National Grid pay them directly, or do they pay into the town and the town pays the police officer?
So we bill National Grid. So we will pay the officers get paid every 2 weeks. So if they do a detail for National Grid, the town will pay them, and then we will bill National Grid, and then National Grid pays us back. We have a detail account, and so we pay them bi-weekly, and then we bill the company, whatever private company it does. There's no cost to the town for the officers that do the details for outside vendors. The town actually makes a little bit of money because there's a 10% admin fee when we invoice them. And if they need a cruiser, there's a $25 fee for a cruiser. So outside vendor details are no cost to the town, and they're charged for the services.
Now, when an officer is doing the outside vendor, does that sometimes push him into overtime on our part for the town? Or if they, I presume they get, time and a half after so many hours on overtime?
Yeah, they have a specific detail rate in the contract. So when a vendor, if National Grid or Verizon calls us and they say, we need a detail officer for such and such a day, we tell them how much it costs. If they say they need a cruiser, or if they're gonna be in a heavy traffic area, we tell them what it's gonna cost. And an officer's not allowed to do a detail and get paid overtime at the same time. They're either on a detail or they're working. So they usually work details on their day off, or if they're working a 3 to 11 shift, they can work a detail from 8 to 2, or whatever the hours may be. And if it falls outside of their availability hours, they're not allowed to get paid twice. It doesn't create overtime.
Okay, it doesn't create overtime on our side. They could have been on a detail for, say, 3 days, and then have, say, 24 hours, and then they come to work. That 24 hours doesn't go towards overtime, so that we can get to a point where we can pay them overtime.
Yep, no, not at all. Anything they do outside vendor is charged to the vendor. The only time they will get overtime for us is if they go to court, if they're on a call, and their shift is about to end, and let's say someone's supposed to get off at 3 o'clock, and 2:45, there's a bad car accident, and they're there till 4 or 5. That will accrue some overtime. Investigations, if they have to stay over, court, those are overtime type situations, but details and overtime are completely separate. The details don't cost the town anything unless we as a department are contributing to it for a town event. Like if it's Oktoberfest, the police department contributes some detail officers to the Oktoberfest. So they pay for a couple officers, I pay for a couple officers.
Okay, anybody else at this point? Go ahead, Carol, you have another question?
Yeah, when, on the salaries and stuff that you have in there, that does not include any of the details that the officers would get. The salaries would increase beyond those because of the details.
Right, anything, what's in this budget right here is their salaries and wages that come from the town. Anything above and beyond that, detail-wise, is not included in this. It doesn't cost the town.
And, all right, and do you show how much money we get into the town from these details?
Yes, I can show you that. I don't have the exact number, but it's probably, per year, past couple of years, it's probably been over $100,000 that we paid out and taken in details.
But not to the general fund, not the town's share.
What's that?
What is the town making off of that?
Whatever, oh, what is the town making? Whatever, 10% of whatever we bill out. Every detail vendor that we bill gets charged 10% of the bill. So if it's 400, they get charged $440. $40 goes to the general fund, 400 pays the officer.
So about 10,000 maybe on those numbers.
Yeah, give or
a year.
take.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else questions at this point? Matt, do you have any questions at this point?
No.
Okay, Chief, want to carry on?
Sure.
Actually, I do have one. I might as well ask it now. You said you charge $25 for a cruiser on a detail? Is that a flat fee? Is that per hour?
That's flat fee for the day.
Is that competitive compared to other departments?
It is. I haven't looked at it in a while. Last time we did it was at the beginning of the contract when we changed over the detail rate, and I got information from surrounding towns, and $25 for the day was a flat rate.
All right, Chief, carry on.
Okay, we all set with salary? Any other questions on salaries? Okay, we'll move over to expenses. So if you look over there on page 4, the bottom line number for expenses is 207,775. And in between there, the top and the bottom, there's about 29 individual line items that amount to that. A lot of these I have kept the same, because I think I finally got them to the point where I know where they're gonna zero out. It's kind of a guessing game every year, because some could go up, some could go down. The biggest increase that I think I have, well, not the biggest increase, but the first increase I have is about $4,250 for our RMS software. So what we use for our records management system, our in-house records, we call it IMC, that usually goes up about $1,200 a year. And this year also included $3,000 for a scheduling software that we purchased earlier this year. We wanted to try it. It was something new. We've been doing all our details, our billing, our invoice, our schedule, all on Excel sheets the old way. Now we're doing it with actual scheduling software, which does our details. It pages out our details to the officers, pages out overtime, any open shifts. Everything can be done by the app. We can do our invoices on it. We can track the details much better than the old Excel sheets that we used to use. That cost $3,000, and I paid for it this year to try it out of our asset forfeiture fund, which didn't cost the town anything for the first year because I took it out of that account. So I'm looking to renew it, and that's why I added $3,000 to that account.
On page 4, Chief, what
Yep.
item is that?
That is going to be under license and subscriptions,
Okay.
which will be, it might not be on page 4. Oh, software. Yeah, it'll fall under software.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's the 23,250 line item, right?
Right, correct.
Chief, does that add value to the group? In other words, do you feel like it saves admin time or anything like that, or is it just more? Does it help? Just helps you guys to order out?
Both. Without a doubt, it helps and it saves time. Like I said, for us, we used to have to page out the detail or overtime, put the slips in, have the officers fill out a handwritten slip, collect the slip, process the invoice on Excel. Now it's all plug and play. You put the overtime in the system or the detail in the system, it gets paged out. They finish their detail, they can electronically sign their detail slip, which automatically goes into the system. We can click on it, details complete, X amount of hours, print invoice, print invoice. We could actually even email the invoice directly. A lot of companies are getting their invoices through email now. We can do a ton of things with the software that we couldn't do before, and it definitely saves time, makes it easier and saves a lot of time.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else questions at this stage?
Is that IMC?
I have a question. The bottom of the expense sheet, it says replace equipment for $32,000. What kind of equipment did you replace for that amount?
We are looking to replace our firearms this year. So that in and of itself is, that account last year I think was 1,250. I'll give you the exact number.
$750.
There's a button. I'll press it.
Yeah, you're right. So last year that was 750. So we have a quote of right around $31,000 to replace 25 firearms, holsters that need to be updated for the new firearms, lights, and optics for the firearms. So that's everything. And the reason why we want to do it now is these firearms that we have now are coming up on 6 years old. The holsters are 12 years old. And once you get around 6 years old on firearms, each one of these firearms gets probably about 1,200 rounds put through it a year. And it's not like that the average person who goes out and buys a gun, goes to the range a couple times a year, comes home, puts it in the safe, and takes it out a couple times. You know, the springs start going on these, and the magazines, the pins start going. I mean, we have two very good armorers in the department that take good care of the weapons, but on their recommendation, we wanted to put it in now. I think now is a good time to do it, because like I said, we're coming up on that 6th year. The average life is probably about 5 or 6 years for us, and we got the cruisers coming up in the next couple of years.
Right.
So I kind of want to get this out of the way.
I didn't know if that was maybe the fingerprint machine. I had heard some talk.
No, we were able to actually update that. So, yep, the fingerprint machine is in good shape. We were able to update that last year, actually. So our biggest concern right now is, which always is preparing for that time we need to talk about cruisers, which is outside of this budget, so I'm not really worried about it right now, but I didn't want to get 2 years down the road and say, okay, now we're 8 years on the firearms, now we're 9 years on the firearms, on top of the cruisers, we got to add $30,000. So we wanted to try and get ahead of it. So that is actually probably the biggest expense you're going to see in the expense side, which really increased that number from this year to next year's request. And in addition to that, I put the gasoline line item back up to $36,000. Last year, we were at 28.5. And the reason we were at 28.5, because the previous year we were at 36. And we were up, and Matt and I had this conversation numerous times. We said, we're never going to see it under $3 a gallon. Actually, so last year, average price we paid per gallon for the police department was like $2.19.
Oh, yeah.
Right now, we're at $2.90, which is still a great price for fuel. But I can see I'm back up towards that 36,000 threshold. So you're looking at, just between those two line items and a couple other small increases in a couple of other lines in this, that's, $40,000, which is an increase on the expense side.
Yeah.
If you took that, if those two items were removed, or if I didn't have to put that $40,000 in there, I'd be right at basically 2 and 2
Last year's number.
on each side. Yeah, it would be a very minimal increase.
Yeah, so when I got the budget from Gene, I got my hand calculator out super fast, and I noticed the overall police budget was about a 5% increase. But the big chunk of that is the firearms and the gas, right?
Yeah.
If you took those out, it'd be about 2%. So.
Yep. And I watched your meeting, so you said I could call you and ask you for whatever I want. Here it is.
That's the part you saw.
Yeah. And recorded.
Yeah.
Right, watched it again.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't ask for world peace, though,
Right,
Chief. So,
right.
yeah.
So, and if you look at the very end, there's the comparison there. Like I said, the police department is essentially 3 items: salaries, expenses, and cruisers. We're zeroed out on the cruisers.
Yep.
I put those, those 2 items in there, the bigger increases, which brought it up to 207,775. And, that's basically the budget.
May I?
Yeah, Sandy?
Okay. So for expenses, it's like a 28% increase over last year. If when we sit down and we talk about this, is there anything in the expenses that you could live without, like if we had to, like, say, we just don't have money for 28%?
Yeah. I would have to honestly go through it. There's really not a lot to cut in those other areas within the expenses.
Right.
So we have to, if that was the discussion and the decision, there's not a lot to cut in salaries
Right.
without dropping personnel.
Okay.
Or taking the chance that you're gonna not have to go back to town meeting in May and say, look, my overtime, if I could cut $30,000 out of that overtime budget, but that's, that's taking a chance. Because you don't want to cut the salary. So if money had to be cut, I mean, obviously I'd have to look at that 31, take a serious look at the 31 for the firearms.
Right.
And,
Could that be phased, maybe? Couple, no, it has to be all, the whole thing.
Yeah, because new firearms, it's like buying the cruisers. It's not really the firearms that cost, it's not really the cruisers that cost, it's all the equipment that you put on it.
Right.
You're talking about the optics, the lights, and the holsters for these specific weapons.
Right. Is there any, like, buyback that you would get?
Yeah, there is.
Money back?
Yeah.
So
There
is this-
trade-in. This includes, the cost includes the trade-in for the
Okay.
current firearms that we
Okay.
have.
Each of the next 3 years, we're going to see the cruisers on here, right? Two,
Right.
2, and 2.
2, 2, and
right?
2.
Okay.
Yeah, in 24, 25, and 26. And, that's, 2 cruises by then, you're between 90 and 100, depending on what you have to do for equipment. I'm hoping that we'll get another round of this equipment that we purchased last time to be able to put into these cruisers, but I won't know until we actually make the purchase.
But the next gap for the firearms is 4 years away, right? Off a non-police cruiser year, right? If we waited.
Right.
Right? It's got to be done now.
Yeah, it
or
would
it's
be.
4 more years.
Yeah, it would be 4 years, yeah. If you had to wait, you'd go cruisers, and then you'd be looking at 4 years.
3 years with the cruisers.
Right.
Yeah, Phil?
Yeah, so through the chair to Matt, he had mentioned the guns and the cruisers are the constants in the budget, and they're the ones that spike the budget maybe a little bit. I keep thinking back to the road repair conundrum that we have with the, we have to all of a sudden find a whole bunch of money to fix those. Is it prudent, or do other towns actually allocate incremental amounts to be set aside within the department for those purchases, so that instead of $60,000 for a cruiser in 1 year, it happens to be maybe broken up into like $15,000 for 4 years, and then at the end of the 4 years, the chief has the money in hand, if you will. And I know there's cost of living and all the other stuff, but is that something that is possible? Like, I'm thinking about the guns. Is it they're replacing 30? Can we put it in the budget every year to replace 4 or 6 or whatever? You know what I mean? Just throwing an idea out there. I don't know if any other departments do it that way.
You want to answer that one, Matt?
No. First of all, you said find money on the camera, which, Phil, I mean, you should know by now, you don't find money in Douglas. But I also think that's more an accounting question for Gene.
You can't, each year stands on its own, You can't put in 15,000 each year and then have it accumulate. It's not like saving. You can't save the money. He can't put 15,000, not spend it, and then have it at the end of 4 years. It's not a revolving account like the receipts reserved for appropriation account. They cannot appropriate a certain amount of money and leave a balance in there. You can't do that in the general fund. So the general fund is appropriated each year. We have done the cruises, we've broken out that way, so the expense of the repair doesn't fall in the same year. We used to buy them 6 on, 6 off. We now do it 2, 2, and 2, so it stabilized the repair and maintenance. You weren't having everything come in at the same time. What the chief's doing here with the firearms is he's going on an off cruise a year to kind of stabilize his budget. But you can't budget 15,000, not spend it, add it to next year's 15,000, not spend it a year before, have 60,000. It doesn't work that way.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking about not shocking the account every year or when there's big purchases.
Anybody else? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Len.
I guess it's maybe a silly question, but I was reading through your proposal and I was looking at the part about the town being fully accredited. What does that mean for us? Do we get any kind of financial compensation for that, or it's just like bragging rights that you're?
It means you have a very good police department. No,
no money from the state.
No, we do get. I believe we get reimbursed for our accreditation fee through Maya. But what it does is it ensures that we're doing what we say that we're going to do. We're held to, 382 of the best practices in policing. So we have policies, procedures, and we say that we're going to do this. Not only do we say that we're going to do it, they come in and assess us, and they make sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do. So it is. It's there's only 91 accredited police departments in the state of Massachusetts right now, and we're one of them out of 351 cities and towns. So it took a lot of hard work to get there. Unfortunately, I wish we would get more from it, but I think our people get a lot from it, and I think the community gets a lot from it, that knowing that we're following the best practices.
Congratulations to our Douglas Police Department.
Thank you.
I would like to ask Matt if he thinks that the fact that our police department is accredited, that might help us when we're getting our insurance on them, because obviously our police are well trained, and they would not likely make mistakes, and some other ones would mean they'd probably help us not being sued. Do you think that's a possibility, Matt? The fact that they're accredited could help us with the insurance?
There's no formal program with Maya to give us a break on our rates for accreditation. However, it is a fact that, I have to knock on wood every time I say things like this about insurance, but our workers' compensation, professional liability, and police liability loss ratios are extremely low, which is one of the reasons why it kind of offsets our outrageously high property casualty claims. Workers' comp is right around 29% loss ratio, and police is in the like 11%, and professional liability is 11%. We just don't file many claims on that side of the business. It's our buildings that cost us money. So to the extent that our police officers are highly trained and follow best practices, they just don't do the things that cause liability that some other departments would see.
Right.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to make.
Okay, anybody else? Questions? Matt, do you have any at this point?
Yeah, so I'm going to make a point with a little bit of melodrama, if you don't mind, Chief, but you guys are truly amazing, because it looks like you work in the dark, in the cold, and you don't even have internet. I mean, $100 a year, what's that about?
Right. That is $7.99 a month for Spectrum.
But are we absorbing any of your internet
Absolutely.
connection
The
charge?
town, this building, being in this building, I don't pay electric, I don't pay internet, I don't pay heat. That all comes out of Adam. So,
Right?
you know,
Take it while you can get it.
right, exactly. And we've had that conversation before, and that's one of my biggest concerns when we talk about, you know, new buildings or moving someplace or whatever. That would increase my police expense budget
Right.
exponentially. I don't even know where to begin, but it would be well over $50,000.
Yeah.
So that's always been a concern of mine.
I just want everybody to be aware that some of the intricacies of the budget, we, in a very hidden way, cross-subsidize each other
Yeah.
as departments. So IT, we have an IT function that picks up a lot of this cost. And then when it comes to heat and light, we're doing it through Adam's budget on the facility side.
Yeah.
On IMC, fire's piggybacked on you, right? So they have modules, but you're paying for the basic software package.
They have modules, that, what we're paying for, I'd have to check with Mark Dunleavy, because I think we pay for our basic package and our modules, and I think Ms. Kelly, you guys pay for your own IMC?
Yes, we do.
module, right? Yeah,
Yep.
so they pay for their own. We're intertwined, but they have their package that they have to pay for, and I have our package and our modules. You can pick and choose what you get from IMC. There's things on there that we would never use, so we don't pay for them. But they charge you for every module or, you know, every program that they write is costing you money.
When I got the E911 grant notification, I noticed there really aren't that many towns that do what we do. Can you explain a little bit about your strategy for the grant and how you use it to subsidize what goes on?
Hopefully, the 911 grant will come out again. And when it does come out, it's hard to budget for that because it doesn't come out until May or June, when we're almost done. And the state in the past has pulled the, you know, no fault of their own, budget problems or whatever, all of a sudden you're counting on that money, and then all of a sudden in April and May, you find out, oh, that grant's not going to be available again this year. So we take advantage of that. We get about 36,000 we can get from state 911, which I can use for salaries, for part-time dispatchers. We can use it for equipment if we had to within the dispatch. I mean, so we have used it to purchase cameras before, security cameras for outside the dispatch area, outside there, computers for dispatch, monitors. But the past couple of years, if it's available, I put it towards salaries, because I know if I can get that money in there, that's going to save some money in the line item. The only problem is, when you're preparing the budget, you have to prepare for, if I have 300 or 200 shifts that I know I have to fill with part-time dispatchers, I have to make sure that money's in here, because if that grant gets pulled out last minute, then I'm going to be short here. So it does benefit us if we're able to get it, because I've been using it for salaries, saves us some money on the salary side. Whatever we don't spend goes back. But if my overtime last year was running a little high, I have a little bit to play with in there with whatever's left over from that part-time salary account. But like I said, I budget for all the shifts just in case that goes away. I wish they came out with it earlier, but it's usually not to the end of the fiscal year. Frankly, our budget's practically done before they even come out with it.
So what does that money come into your department? And then if you already have the money for what you needed at the end of your fiscal year, it diverts back to the general funds through the special town
Right,
meeting?
so
To one of those
if
special
it
town
comes
meeting
up,
line items?
it's a reimbursable grant. So in May, if State 911 says, Douglas, you're eligible for $36,000, we can figure out what we're going to do with that. All right, let's put it all towards salaries.
Right?
So I can spend that down, with part-time dispatchers, get reimbursed for that money, and then whatever's left in this budget,
Right.
if there's anything left in my salary line item at the end of the year, that goes back to the town. It's like a turn back.
Gene, how does it get back to you?
I'm sorry?
So if the department has, let's say, exactly $36,000 came in from the grant, they use the 36 in grant money, and that makes a perfect 36,000 in excess funds year-end because of perfect budgeting.
It closes into free cash.
It closes on June 30 at midnight on your ledgers into free cash without any town need, special town meeting or anything to vote to bring it back?
No, it's set up, when the chief notifies me that there's a grant account set up, he charges the grant directly, and we watch for the reimbursements, which means he's not spending his general fund money. So whatever is unspent in his budget closes to free cash as of June 30.
And the years I've been on here, I don't think I've heard that conversation, but is that true on June 30th, really for all the departments?
Correct.
Okay, thank
The
you.
turnbacks make up free cash unless they've encumbered the money.
Okay, thanks.
If
It's a
you,
component of free cash. isn't it?
Sure, right.
if you look back, and I can get the information for you, but if you look back over the past 3 or 4 years, my expense budget, I think I've gotten it down to where I've turned back maybe $100, sometimes between 100, 200, 300. Because a lot of things I won't buy until the end of the year, until I know I have the money in there. Like if fuel goes crazy, I'll wait until May to buy training ammo
Sure.
for,
Got it.
you know,
Got it.
so, because I don't want to
Sure.
come to you guys
Sure.
in May and
Right.
say, hey,
Right.
you know, fuel was nuts, I need more money for my expenses. So if you look back at my expense side historically, I know over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been probably between 1 to 500, and that was probably because I couldn't get the invoice prior to June 30th.
I got it. Yeah,
But there has always been some give back on the salary side because of those grants.
fair enough.
So
I'm good, thank you.
Matt, anything else for the chief?
A couple things. Because a lot of people haven't heard of or fully understand the drug forfeiture account and how it all works, and you just give us a quick overview of how that works.
Yep, asset forfeiture account, so any investigation that any member of our department is involved in, state or federal, and we seize money, vehicles, jewelry, stolen property, stuff goes to auction, we get a percentage of that, we get an amount of that. And over the years, we've accumulated close to $100,000.
Is that a fixed percent usually? Like,
Yeah, the feds are,
We get generally like 10 or 12, and
yeah.
then for state cases, it's supposed to be 50% to the DA's office, 50% to the local departments, but if it's like a multi-jurisdictional thing, it can be anywhere within that 50%.
gotcha, okay.
In federal cases, if it's a task force, say, we have one of our officers on the federal task force, there's 4 officers from other towns, they'll all get a percentage of what they seize. So over the years, between state and federal accounts, we've been able to do a lot of things with some of the seizure money that we wouldn't be able to do without it. We bought vehicles, we've updated our interview room one time with cameras, you know, at a tune of $10,000, $15,000. Computers, when, you know, times are tough, laptops, there's certain things that we can buy with it, mostly technology, equipment, but it's been a huge help for us.
So my last thing, Mr. Chairman, is more of a comment than a question. You'll also note that there's not a lot of radio equipment replacement in this budget, and that's because public safety radio project is everything from microwave transmission to the portable radios that public safety people are going to carry on them. So that expense that you might normally see replacing 5 or 6 radios a year, every year, isn't in this budget because we're replacing everything all at once as a capital item. And I built all this up to, we said we'd make the sausage on camera. This is how I look at this particular department's budget. It's generally speaking not usually a very good candidate for adjustment downward, because first of all, it runs very lean. It's a straightforward department. They need what they need. Police officers without guns are not. This isn't London, and we're not trying to make a point. a lot of their operating expenses are actually tucked away in other parts of the budget, and they have access to sources of revenue, grant funds, from their own productive activity that benefits them, but they're able to subsidize the things they need to have because they're able to get that outside source of money in. So the fact of the matter is, it is much more expensive to run a police department than this budget shows. So if he had to take all of his costs, put them all in, he'd be substantially higher than what he is here. So a lot of times people say, wow, IT, you're going to spend 80 grand on IT, what is all that? And a good part of that is the whole operation of the town. It includes the police department, and it wasn't broken out into their budget or scored against them. I think it's a perfectly intelligent way to do a budget. It's just now obvious to people who aren't familiar with the process to know that. But that's all I had, Mr. Chairman, on this budget.
Anybody else questions for the chief? So, Chief, I have a couple. One is, going forward, we're talking about cruisers. Anything else that start to plant the seed we need to be thinking about strategically as we look out, say, 5 years?
5-year plan?
Because our population might grow in town and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I've talked with Matt about it before. I think we need to start to have the conversation about increasing the department, especially with the part-timers and reserve officers going away.
Yeah.
I think right now, ideally, I mean, we're in a good spot, but for me, ideally, staff-wise, I think we could use probably 2 more officers. Blackstone is very similar to what we are. They have 2 more full-time officers than we do, same population. Probably a little bit more business, but same type community.
Yeah.
And when you look at staffing for us, there's a couple of ways you can look at it. You can look at the FBI numbers where they say there should be 2 officers per 1,000 residents, or call volume. For me, that's difficult. I look at it like, what's the best staffing for us, right? So we got, during the day, you have 2 patrolmen on, but you also have myself, the lieutenant, and the detective sergeant that are available. So if something happens, something major happens, you could have 6 to 7 officers respond, right? Because you got 4 schools in town, you got 2 banks, you got a ton of traffic. Our daytime population's got to triple with the amount of traffic that goes through here, and that's not even in the summer with the state park. If you look at the state park numbers, a couple years ago, we looked at them, they had over 100,000 visitors. So during the day, I'm comfortable with what we have on. If you look at 3 to 11, most times we have 3 people scheduled. If someone takes a day off, now we have 2. Is that best staffing for us? I don't think so. I think there should be 4, a sergeant and 3 patrolmen that has the coverage regardless. You can't predict when something's going to happen. You can look at the numbers and you can look at the statistics, say Friday, Saturday, Sunday, okay, let's put an extra guy on. Could be Tuesday night at 2:30 in the morning where you have a major incident. You can't plan for that. You never know. So you have to, I would like to staff the shifts, sergeant, or on the overnights, should be a sergeant, 2 patrolmen all the time. 3 to 11 shift, ideally, in a perfect world, sergeant, 3 patrolmen all the time. Someone takes a day off, sergeant, 2 patrolmen, but you can handle almost anything that comes in until you get mutual aid if it's that big of an event. We have some nights where we're running a busy 3 to 11 shift and there's 2 officers. You have an arrest and somebody has to go, and the prisoner has to go to the hospital, you're down to 1 person in town. It's not the best case scenario, but it's the scenario we have. So over the next 5 years, I think we have to have a serious conversation and look at increasing the amount of officers we have. I would say at least 2 over the next 5 years, and we looked out even 30. I think depending on what happens with infrastructure and the population, you could be looking at adding 2 officers every 5 years.
I know a couple of years ago, we talked about a new police station. Is that still on somebody's radar, or you?
Yeah, we're in conversation about that now. We're a committee putting documents together and presentations, and I'm sure it will be brought up. at some point. I know
Okay.
that's certainly not something that's going to happen overnight. It needs some serious consideration. Right now, on our end, downstairs, we have everything we need. We just need it to be 2.5 to 3 times size bigger. We literally do. We have everything that we need. It just needs to be bigger.
Okay,
We're running out of room.
all right. Anybody else, either you guys zooming or people here, questions for the chief? Gene, do you have any comment on the proposed budget from the police department?
I don't. I think you covered it very well.
Okay,
I had my pre-meeting.
okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, and if
Appreciate it.
anybody has any questions, any point in time, either about the firearms or anything that's in here, feel free to email me and I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil, did you have a question yet or not?
No, I was just gonna say, good stuff.
Okay.
The police department always presents very well.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in, you guys.
I have to ask about the dog, chief.
Dog's doing good. Yep, dog's doing great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Last time I saw you, it was a little chunky.
Yeah, he actually lost some weight. He's looking good.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it. Bob, are you here? Yes, Gene?
Could I ask you to consider taking the reserve fund transfer out of order because the chief and the assistant chief are here?
Okay. And that was for 485,250, correct? Or not?
So it's over there.
Yes, thank you.
But that your email,
That was the balance prior to the request.
oh, I see, okay. Oh, ambulance stuff, right, so, you want to walk us through it a minute, Gene?
I'll let them speak to it.
Chief, you want to talk about the reserve fund request for ambulance stuff, right?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, chief. Good evening.
I'm getting my mask off here, sorry. So,
Please identify yourselves for our viewers at home.
Chief Inch from the fire department.
I'm Kelly Manning, I'm the Assistant Fire Chief.
Okay, welcome, everybody, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a rough year for the fire department as far as injuries on duty, and we've also had a number of COVID claims where we've had people out of work for extended periods of time and having to backfill. Obviously, an ambulance needs at least 2 people on it, so it's hit our overtime account pretty hard. Also, when we did the contract this past year in July, we weren't able to foresee that we were going to have 2 employees that were not going to make their probation. So that was the case. That created 2 positions where we had to hire, and that's obviously an expense. Uniform-wise, it's an expense all the way around. And one of the things that we did as far as that came into the contract contractually, used to be we could send a person to the fire academy to the call vol program, which was at night. It's in the contract now that they go to the full-time members go to the fire academy for 11 weeks, 5 days a week. So we have to fill that slot for them. So we weren't able to foresee that in advance, and with the sicknesses, we got down on the overtime account and the part-timers, and we also lost some part-timers. We had one go to Washington DC fire, we had one go in the Navy. So we're having a little bit of a struggle with part-timers, and so what was happening was our account is set up on the ambulance side. We have 2 budgets, you folks know that, ambulance side and fire side. But we have to assign our members to one side or the other. So we assigned the paramedics and the lieutenant paramedics to the ambulance side. They were the ones that had to take some of those shifts, or a lot of those shifts, so it created an imbalance in that side. There's money on the fire side, but right now not on the ambulance side. So that really is it really in a nutshell.
So 20,000, Gene, right?
So what I asked, that request would have come in a little higher, and I did talk with the chief about that. What I asked him to do is do a very conservative estimate through April 27th, because the next payroll would fall after town meeting. And my intention is to put an article or a transfer on town meeting to fund from that April to the rest of June from the ambulance receipts reserved for probation account or some other account. So I'm not saying that they won't be back before you, but I don't want to deplete the reserve fund because, as you know, we do have the principal assessor that we're now filling that position with a outside consultant, and we're going to be on a month-to-month basis with that. So the chief was gracious enough to listen to me, and we put that in the 20,000.
So the motion would be that we transfer $20,000 from the reserve fund to the ambulance account? Is that?
The ambulance wage account, correct.
Okay. Somebody be willing to make that motion?
I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
So moved.
All right, so a motion made by Lynn, was that you?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, second, anyone?
Second.
Sandy Kuiper seconds. Any discussion? So it's $20,000 from the reserve fund to the ambulance account, is that
The
right?
ambulance wages, yes.
And, okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Can we do the discussion part?
Okay, discussion, Howard, sorry.
A couple of quick questions. Gene, what's in our reserve fund before this event?
$45,250.
Okay. And Chief, from what you said, am I reading that do you have a corresponding somewhat of a, not an excess, it's never an excess, but money on the fire side?
We do have some money in the fire side.
Okay.
We had talked to Gene about that. However, we can't do an interdepartment until after the town meeting, which was new to me, which is fine.
Yeah.
It's, after
That's
a
what
while,
I'm
you
trying to
start to figure
understand.
things out. And,
Yeah.
And
Okay.
she reminded me of that, and as I'm getting old, sometimes I need to be reminded.
Yeah, I got it. Got it.
But in all seriousness, we're doing the best we can to really keep an eye on things, and we're going to do the best we can to see how far we can get with the, but again, these were things that were contracted that we couldn't foresee, and we really couldn't control COVID either, so.
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard, sorry about
Thank you,
that.
Chief.
Anybody else question?
Do you have a write-up of this? I'm trying to understand if I had a write-up or any kind of email or anything like that about this, detailing the 20,000. Did you?
Yes, it's a reserve fund, it's a request for transfer from a reserve fund. I can read it to you if you'd like.
Email of February 3, Phil, it was in there
Okay.
from Gene.
Yeah, all right, and so that's the transfer request, right? That's not the actual detail of the breakdown of the request?
It's what she emailed us was the official document that has the 20,000 on it, right?
Right. So that's what it is. It's just all one line item or one reason why the 20,000? I thought I heard a few things that he said. I'm trying to write them down to remember.
Well, here's how I have it broken up, Phil. We have our overtime account, let's see, is,
Going to overtime and part-time salaries.
yeah, it's going to overtime and part-time salaries, but I wanted to give you the number of the account. It's 51200 and 51300. Those are the overtime accounts and the part-time accounts. And one was down to 2,716.63. The other was down to 2,246.79. So we asked for 8,000 to go in one account, the part-time one, and the 12 to go into the overtime one. 12,000. So it's split up between two accounts.
All right. All right. And so these are just it's all related to those two employee loss type things.
Yeah, it's a combination of, yeah. We had a couple of IODs too, which were injured on duties when normally, well, I won't even get into that, but they were longer.
There was 2 in the summer that went through the summer.
Right.
And then we had to send the 2 employees to the fire academy and backfill those shifts, and we used the part-time salaries to fill those, so a lot of that was being filled by part-time and not overtime.
Yeah, we always try to do part-time first before overtime, obviously.
Sure.
We're having great difficulty getting part-time people to work, and we've lost a lot of them, or they've become ill with COVID themselves, so that's also hit our overtime side.
You and everyone else,
Okay.
right?
Yep, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It was like the Phantom was speaking because I couldn't see anybody. I thought that the camera zoomed over. I was like, where is that voice coming from? There we go. I think I see you now. Yeah, there we go. I apologize.
Okay, anybody else on the motion? Questions for the chief or for Gene? So again, the motion is to transfer $20,000 from the reserve fund to the ambulance account.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
Can you do a roll call?
Yeah, do
Oh,
it.
roll call vote. Okay, so
Sandy Kuiper's aye.
Howard D'Amico, aye.
Dick Vandenberg, aye.
Carol Goggins, aye.
Bill Landry, aye.
Lynn Mazzulli, aye.
Linda Moore, aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming in.
Unanimously here. That's good. Thanks, Chief.
Thanks.
Take care. Thank you both.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yep.
'cause
Matt.
again, it's in the course of learning how the intricacies of the budget or our operations. IOD, injured on duty status, is covered by our insurance through Chubb. But as Gene will explain, when we are reimbursed by Maya for the expense of carrying people who are injured on duty, they don't get to keep the money in the
Right, sure,
department.
yeah, sure.
It comes back to the general fund and it closes to the general fund.
Sure.
So it will show up at the end of the year on as an insurance reimbursement
Okay.
for that portion.
Oh,
So
so-
whoever was out IOD.
So you got some money and put it in general, and then we're just
Or will.
transferring out and putting it back
Just-
to wages?
Gene does a good job of trying to make everybody realize that free cash is a complex animal. There are
Okay.
many sources of funds that make their way, like water going down a hillside and eventually joins a single stream.
Sure.
Insurance reimbursements is
Well-
one of those little rivulets that goes down and eventually becomes part of something. You can't count on it, right?
Sure.
So it's not a operating budget item. At the same time, it arose because of something that happened in the operating budget.
Sure.
So it's not quite a one-time thing.
It's actually recorded as non-recurring miscellaneous revenue because it's non-recurring, it's not going to happen every year. So that's immediately, that line immediately increases the free cash number because we don't budget anything for it. So everything that is above zero, so it increases free cash by that amount. No account can be treated in the general fund as a revolving account. So even though they're paying out the expense, I can't take the revenue and put it back. I can't make them whole.
But that's why our 50,000 is there each year, right? To run a number that we can take out of it while we know you're getting money on the other side to mostly offset it.
But
If-
this being this early in the fiscal year, and I consider anything before June early, putting it into the reserve fund.
Sure.
I'm very protective about it because we have many departments that, may need to see you, so.
I would assume you wouldn't put those up on the front unless you had already vetted that you thought it was necessary.
Yeah, that was a little higher, we brought it down.
Yeah, right.
But it's food for,
Understood, caught that, right.
Mr. Chairman, it is food for thought for your committee, however, whether 50,000 is a number you feel safe with. And I think as we get closer to the end of the budget conversation, we should look at the total exposure we had to IODs in the year that we're in. So we've had 2 police officers? Definitely one,
I
long-term.
think the other one was sick, wasn't an IOD.
Okay, so we've had 1 IOD in the police department and a couple in the fire department. And that, in the back of our minds, is part of what, because when that number starts to
That's
run
an
up, these
exact-
guys have no choice but to
That's an
come to you.
exact reserve fund transfer event, right? Is you need it now, and the place to get it is there without a town meeting vote, and it's coming back, but just not today.
Right.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
How do you change that 50,000?
Well, you would ask, in the budget, you might ask for 60 or 65 instead.
Comes to our budget.
Yeah, it goes-
Oh,
Right.
okay, okay.
Yeah. Or like sports fees or something.
I suppose.
You had to go there. Is it that late already?
No.
Is there a game on that you want to see?
Always.
Curling, right, Howard? Insurance is like a rivulet, man. I
We
like
have
that.
cues tonight.
Oh, do we do?
We do, not you.
We've lost.
Bob? All right, we're going through our agenda, everybody. Item 2, economic development, Robert Menarek.
Bob and Eric, yes.
Hello, Bob, come on in. The water's warm.
Do you actually need money from the budget? How much?
Yeah.
I think Matt budgeted 7,500.
Okay. Is that good?
Probably not. I have time to talk to Matt about that.
Okay.
There are some items coming up that we should have money for, but we won't. I will do a presentation for you and kind of explain a few things.
Okay.
Yeah, if you would.
Okay. Well, it's always nice following the fire chief and the police chief because I'm kind of simple. I have no police cruisers, I have no
Right,
fire
right,
trucks, no firearms.
We're done.
I don't even have a dog.
Right. See?
If you would, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to do like a State of the Union for economic development, kind of let you know the hows and the whys and the whats and the whens of economic development. The where is pretty easy, it's Douglas. It's basically on the eastern side of the Route 140, on the eastern side of town, on the Route 146 corridor. The when, it's now. It's now or never. The hows and the whys, I will explain why we're doing things certain ways and how they have to be done that way. As you know, there's been an uptick in economic development within the past 2 years. We do have two big projects on the horizon right now. One, you might see the construction going on right now on the Blackstone Valley Logistics Center on the other side of 146. That's 36% Sutton, 56% Uxbridge, and a little 8% of Douglas. The only reason we got invited to that building was because we have a small wedge sliver crossing 146 into that area.
Bob, I always get confused. Is that the Lackey Dam or the Route 16 interchange?
That's Lackey Dam.
Yeah.
That's Lackey Dam.
Okay.
The reason I'm doing the Lackey Dam Road is because that's some of us, 8%.
Yeah, okay.
The Route 16 is Serendipity. That project on the same side, on the east side of 146, that is all Uxbridge.
Okay.
Okay. The second large project, I think March 10th, Planning Board be their first meeting. They'll be submitting their application. That's for our 1.1 million square foot warehouse. That's a $100 million project, and it's going to employ about 450 people when it's all said and done. It's going in the McIntyre gravel pit, south of Gilboa Pond. The entrance will be through a brand-new bridge across the Mumpet River, directly across from the mill complex right now.
So it'll be upstream or downstream?
Downstream of the dam.
Of the dam,
Down,
okay.
it's too much bridge to build upstream.
Yeah.
Take the narrowest part of the river, and it's almost a beam the end of the building.
So is that bridge going to be kind of where that old Lackey Dam Road curves, right kind of in there?
It's between the dam and the old Lackey Dam Road.
Okay.
Closer to the dam. Closer to the dam. They want to hit a low point only because they can do gravity sewer from the site connecting to our system. If they had the entrance further up that shallow hill, climbing up towards Shell, they would have to do a force main. So to keep it simple. So those two projects are what you'll be seeing coming in right now. Construction for our warehouse, which is all in Douglas, should be coming in probably late summer. This economic activity started a couple years ago where I teamed up with one of my colleagues to do a field trip. And one of those colleagues is on camera right now, Carol Gogolinski. Carol and I took a field trip to a neighboring town to look for a landowner. We had a visit in an adult beverage establishment to find this landowner, if you will. Now, why am I telling you this? I need to make a point. The point is, these landowners were not coming to Douglas. Douglas had to go to them. These large developers were not knocking down our doors looking to build in Douglas. Douglas had to go to them. This million-square-foot warehouse did not come to Douglas. Douglas had to go to them. And there was a reason for that. We just didn't have the infrastructure to support these large businesses. What you see now, or what you will see, is an $8.5 million water sewer infrastructure upgrade project on Northeast Main Street, North Street, between Main Street and the bridge, the entire length of Gilboa Street and Lackey Dam Road. That's an $8.5 million water sewer project. We did receive a $3 million grant from MassWorks for that. And I'm happy to say we just hit the submit button today for a $3.3 million federal grant to supplement that. So all said and done, keep our fingers crossed, we're looking for about $6.3 million towards that $8.5 million project. And hopefully, there'll be natural gas coming into Douglas. We've been working with the selectmen and Eversource to get that to happen. There's a lot of moving pieces to that right now. But Douglas is the only town, if you go too deep around Douglas, Mendon, Upton, Oxford, Webster, Dudley, Auburn, Sutton, everybody has natural gas. We don't. That does hurt us. I did call last year I made a call to one of our biotech companies, developers who's building in Westboro and Worcester. I told them we had 40 acres available. He asked me, what's our water situation on Davis Street? And I said, we don't have any. He says, how about sewer? I said, we don't have any. He says, how about natural gas? I said, the town doesn't even have natural gas. So our infrastructure right now is woefully inadequate to support these facilities. But my hat is off to the water sewer commissioners because they've been a tremendous help in helping with this $8.5 million water sewer project. And that is only phase one. There's a phase two and a phase three coming up. In addition to the $3 million grant, we did receive a $314,000 grant for design and engineering for Davis Street. Now, if you remember back in, it was November 18th, I was before this committee in a classroom at the high school before COVID hit, pleading my case for a $250,000 grant for design and engineering for Davis Street, and it was subsequently taken off the warrant. So last year, I could not afford not to have design and engineering money. So we applied for a $350,000 grant, which was a 90%, 10% split. We had to do a 10% match. So we ended up with the 90%, which was $314,000. So I think to spend 35 to get 250 back was pretty good deal. I wish my 401k had those returns. The infrastructure, you're going to be hearing a lot from me on infrastructure because it's just necessary to support these projects. We have a big project coming up on North Street. We have Davis Street. Davis Street, we actually have a developer approach Douglas, which I think the tide is turning. The word is out there that Douglas is open for business, and that is good. That's good news for us. So with that said, are there any questions? I know there has to be some questions from the committee on what we expect from these projects. I can tell you industry average, the income, taxable income from these buildings is about 1.5%. That's a national average. So if you take just our 1.1 million square foot warehouse, we could expect $1.5 million of additional tax revenue on that. As you know, from your numbers, the town of Douglas has 4% of our total revenue coming from commercial, which is dismal. Most towns have 20, 25, I think Auburn is 42% of their total taxable income is commercial. Residential is the remainder. We're 96% residential, 4% commercial, and that needs to change. I think that was the driving force behind the Prop 2.5 override. We're still in the fifth year, correct? So 4 years ago, when the town voted for the Prop 2.5 override. That was pretty much a driving force right there. As far as the Blackstone Valley logistics, we won't see a sizable income from that building. Like I said, we only own 8% of that building. We'd be lucky if we get $80,000 tax revenue out of that. There are projects on the horizon right now that I'm working with that will make this project probably look small. I hope at this time next year we can openly discuss those projects, and if they do come to fruition, this will be a happy town.
A more happy town.
A more happy town.
Well done, well done.
So, Bob, in terms of the budget, where the Finance Committee, we present the budget to the town meeting, where in the budget will be items related to economic development in terms of what we propose to our fellow citizens on May?
Last year, we had to write the MassWorks grant, I worked with a consultant, and that consultant charged us $9,500. Luckily, we had an engineering account that's been carried forward for a couple of years, and we tapped that. That has not been replenished, so I don't have the luxury of an account to tap for consulting fees. This federal fund that the Economic Development Administration, we'll call it the EDA, I just hit the submit button tonight. This consultant charges $20,000, $30,000 to write those grants. I know the city of Brockton, it was like a $40,000 bill. We didn't have any money, so the last 3 months, I think I've been holed up. They even closed Cedar Street to keep me home so I could work on this grant.
See that? There was a reason.
I know some of our selected wanted to put a Jersey barriers on the other side and keep me locked. But with that said, we didn't spend a cent for this federal grant. That was all on us.
Nice.
We might have a little bill coming from CMRPC. They did help us with some of the stuff we just did not have access to, census data and stuff like that. They pointed us in the right direction. And they were good for proofreading. They let us know the buzzwords you needed to interject into these applications. The words like job creation, economic development, make sure it's in every other sentence. That's what gets you the grants, and it worked with MassWorks.
So, Matt, in terms of the budget, I'm just scrolling through it here, but is there anything in here that we need to think about to propose to our fellow citizens in May to fund economic development? I mean,
You didn't put a number on it, did you?
No, I didn't, and if we do have a MassWorks grant coming up, it'll be very similar to the previous one. I can handle that. After getting through this federal grant, I can honestly say I look forward to 10 MassWorks grants as opposed to one more federal grant. It is cumbersome.
so I
I
guess,
think what we need is professional services in the backdrop.
okay.
Because you've got to have that sounding board, so having, April available on the MassWorks, and say, this is our package, does it look good? That was money well spent. That was a capital item, you may remember this. We were in
Yeah,
a calm
sure.
meeting late
Yeah,
at night,
absolutely.
going back and forth about whether it was money well spent in the past. Well, we didn't spend it on WBDC. We held on to it, and then we spent it to get this MassWorks grant. So again, the return was phenomenal. But the air is a little bit thin at the top of this mountain when it comes to economic development, and we don't really think so sometimes because we have Selectman Davis on the Board of Selectmen, and this is what he did his whole life. So you always hear somebody at select board meetings who's got a lot to say because it's what he's done. He's an attorney who used to write tax agreement, finance agreements, and land development agreements, and economic development corporation bylaws, and all the things that go into this activity set. He's like one guy. There's not very many people who do that. And so now that we are in constant negotiation with private parties, it's not just coming up with the legalese, as important as that is. What I value from an outside consultant to help Bob is knowing what the industry is doing. What is the typical cost share that the other side is expecting you to try to negotiate to? Since we don't all do this every single day, it helps to have that experienced hand say, there's been 4 or 5 land development agreements across the Commonwealth in the last 6 years, and most of the time, you got a 20%, of the cost of the project. That's what you should be asking for. That's what they're expecting you to ask for. Don't be shy. That's a lot better to have that information than it is to be kind of blind or naive, or whatever word you want to use as you walk into those negotiations. These are sophisticated national construction companies, some of the biggest construction companies in the country, based out of Chicago and Missouri and other places. So this isn't a local yokel who's built a couple of shopping malls. These people build these things on a rapid basis and make a lot of money doing it. So I'm thinking that as I craft the budget, I'm going to try to end up between 15,000, 20,000.
And what is it
And I
currently?
won't get that far, right?
Yeah.
So I know what my backdrop's going to be, but I'm going to try to get there because these people they're just expensive.
What department would that be in the budget, or what?
Economic development.
Okay. Okay.
It has its own line item now. The committee is advisory, right? So it never really rolled up a big budget and asked you for it. But
Is it called
the activity
economic
set-
development?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where the activity set is. I know that's where Gene wants to put it because it's the logical place to put it.
Okay.
So we created a salary item for Bob's position in the Economic Development Commission's fund.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, historically, the EDC has spent postage, advertising, legal fees, $400 every time you put that little ad in the Worcester Telegram, which is a requirement. And they've carried $5,000, and most of it went back to free cash at the end of the year because they didn't spend it. But it was there in case we needed it. We're talking a different animal right now. We have developers agreements with Skinnell Corporation, who is building the Blackstone Valley Logistics Center on the other side of 146. We have CRG, who is building our 1.1 million square foot warehouse. We have to do developer agreements with that. And I know Matt would like an attorney to at least look at these agreements, preferably to write these things. We're not attorneys. And we need professional help when it comes to these things. I would
it's
have.
the boilerplate, where I really need help with is enforceable clauses, right? Because I can write all the clawbacks in the world, but would we ever actually be able to sue and get them if we had to? That's what we really need to help.
It needs the meat, the claw.
So going forward, the budget for next year, is it a doubling of that amount then from what we're currently doing? Is that
That's the objective.
like from 75 up to 20 or something like that?
That's the objective. I mean, again, it's pennies on the dollar in terms of what
Right.
it will bring the town in terms of revenue.
Okay.
So I don't understand why that ask isn't more.
Because the revenue has to come in. We have to see the revenue. We have to not only recognize, we have to realize that revenue before we can spend it.
Not really.
Yeah, really.
No, not really.
Well, the budget is still limited to 2.5, the levy is limited to 2.5% a year. So this is a conversation I started like 2 meetings ago. I don't know that we ever went all the way down the path with it. But no matter how much you grow or anticipate growing, the budget you have today is your revenue budget. And your revenue budget is the levy going up 2.5%. So I did this quick math with staff the other day. I was giving them some training on the budget, and I said, if we anticipate that revenues will go up $700,000, it's healthy number for Douglas to have revenue go up 700,000 year over year. And we know we're going to, right off the top, you're going to give 250 of that to the schools. So now I'm down to 550. Nick Miglianico was in here tonight asking you for 100. Right? Then you have insurance, health insurance, retirement. When you come down to the final product, we may have a couple $100,000 to take initiatives in the budget. So if I gave 10% to this, I would rather put a decent number in the budget, because we can always come back in the fall and ask for more, than to make it look like we're giving somebody not a blank check, but a really large budget out of nowhere, because we didn't do this in the past. I would rather incrementally,
Fair enough.
and have that sort of pay-as-you-go, prove to me that it's a good investment conversation. I don't mind having that conversation. Accountability is good in economic development. I'd rather do that than,
Can I understand a little math again, if I may? So you've got kind of terms for them. The project on the other side of Lackey, it's 8% that we own it, and upon it going live, if you will, it'll generate theoretically, ballpark, call it 80,000 a year in taxable revenue, correct? Give or take, rough numbers.
I think that's a rough.
I'm not asking
rough
Jean,
number.
so we can be
we'll
ballpark
pretend she's
numbers.
not listening.
Yeah, no,
You'll get about,
that's okay.
you'll
No,
get about
it's a different-
30,000 in building permit fees,
Okay,
and then you'll get whatever comes to new growth, and then in its final resting state, it would be about 80,000 a year.
annually,
Yeah.
right? Okay, and that's a little tiny piece. And then the one that we're talking about, that we, in our,
1.1 million.
and
It's-
when,
Call it the CIG warehouse.
CIG, when do you expect that, if you will, to go live?
Probably the summer of 2023. They'll
Just a
start
year.
construction. Yeah, it
Oh,
only
to
takes a
start
year to
construction.
build, the permitting in March.
Yeah.
Figure 4 months of permitting, so midsummer, start construction, and midsummer next year.
Opening summer
Opening for
2023, and generating the tax revenue the next day.
No. So it'll catch up, the assessors will catch up with it by the 31st of December for the following year.
Yeah, there's a little lag.
There's a lag.
Nothing will be going on until 2024.
Does it retroactively finally get caught up to the day it went live?
Well, if they look at what's there as of January 1st,
Snapshot,
snapshot.
okay,
So if it happens after that, you're kind of waiting another fiscal year.
interesting, okay. But whatever that, if you will, let's say the first full fiscal year, our perception on that project alone is a ballpark of $1 million revenue, to the town, right? And so what you're also talking about is other potential projects that you want to have funds available, like you said, whether it's legal or frankly, like you said, folks that
Consulting.
help you write, whether it's writing grants, consulting. And so you want to kind of sort of bootstrap it for 2 or 3 or 4 years and show a progression, but it certainly has a return, right? The more professional the presentations and the more you're able to have the bodies to write them and match the people you're interacting with, the more likely you're going to be able to sell the project, frankly, to some extent.
And the
Obviously, the
MassWorks
land.
grant proved that. Spend
Well-
95, you get 3 million back.
Well, that's kind of the other part of this. So let me understand that the water project is 8.5. Are we committed to that at this point?
That's water and sewer.
Water and
Yeah,
sewer.
8.5?
Yeah. I think we're about as committed can be.
Yep. There'll be, hopefully, if we get pipe is the supply chain problem right now.
Sure.
Last year, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Now, it's getting pipe.
And where's that 1.8, let's say, above the grants? Where's that coming from?
developer matches some of our funds. We have already spent $374,000 in design and engineering. That's already been paid for. Through the past town meetings, we've passed $49,000 here, $34,000 there.
Yeah.
That's already been accounted for.
A lot from the Water
Sewer
Commission.
commissioners have stepped up to the plate.
So both their operating budget and some of their reserves.
Well, we have never seen it as a $1.2 million special appropriation
No,
to complete an $8.5 million
no,
project.
so you have between, you have MassWorks, then you have ARPA funds, which would be our ultimate backstop, which we don't want to have to use, but we could, of 2.7, call it 2.6, because we spent a little bit of it.
Okay.
And the private contributions from the developers themselves.
Okay.
Both developers have put about $3.5 million on the side,
Both being CIG and
and Scanell.
okay.
And hopefully, we won't use all those funds.
And are there other, you talk about natural gas, are there other infrastructure projects? To Dick's question to the chief, are there other 3 to 5 year projects that will help change that 96% even further?
Oh, yes, most definitely. This, just us-
Infrastructure projects, not the developments themselves.
Well, they go hand in hand.
Okay.
Phase 2 and Phase 3 will be huge paybacks.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like, I don't like the word phase because it makes it sound like there's a formal plan somewhere. It really isn't. It's right, opportunity 2, opportunity 3. There's a pipeline of opportunities.
Okay. No
It's
pun
dependent
intended.
upon, it's depending on the general state of the American economy,
So we're not,
competition, because everybody wants these things, because nobody's going to be building textile factories anytime soon. And Boeing's not moving to Douglas to build airplanes here.
yeah,
And corporate campuses, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. They're very fickle. We've been in competitions for these things. We cut our teeth, really, on a national recruitment for a very large pharmaceutical manufacturing site, and the Scanell property was, the property that Scanell is developing was the target. And we worked on that for weeks and weeks.
We did actually very well on that.
Yeah, we were a finalist.
70
Douglas was a finalist, which was very nice.
73 sites. We were given a snowball chance, where, of getting past the first round. We made 3 cuts. We made it to the final 3, which I think was a feather in our cap.
But I digress. So there's,
yeah, okay.
the way I think of it is, the water system gets built out, and the more you can loop it, the better off you
Yeah.
are, because everybody has more water, more flow, and then there's more pressure
Yeah.
in the system. So when we look at developing right along 146 in that part of town, the opportunity, because of where the water already is,
That's kind of what
to
yeah.
create a couple of loops between North Street and 146 is a feasible project. The land would be attractive because it's close to the highway. It would meet our objectives because it puts development close to the highway and not in the core of town, not up against the forest,
Yeah.
but right where there's
Yeah.
already ambient noise and thousands of cars driving by every day. That's what the industry wants, and that's where we're going to try to locate people. So
Is
the
there this-
more, it was designed for residential development, so you have 8-inch pipe where you need 12, things like that.
Yeah, okay.
We have old 6-inch pipe on Gilboa Street.
Yeah.
I mean old. It's probably condensed with the corrosion and the buildup inside. It's probably a 4-inch pipe in reality right now. You need 12-inch water pipes for the fire suppression systems.
Is there more infrastructure structure to go down 16 toward that interchange?
Down Davis Street?
Yeah,
Yes, there's 100 acres readily available there. That's why I applied for the MassWorks grant for design and engineering with that in mind 2 years from now.
Well, you're fibbing, it's not readily available. It's taking a lot of work.
That's our land court issues. We have 5 properties in land court. There's private ownership. It's a
Researching heirs,
conglomeration of
contacting heirs.
different people, different properties.
but the component pieces are looking at also having both the land and eventually the infrastructure to also develop that spoke. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And that's what
Very-
Carol and I did 2 years ago. We assembled 185 acres through 5 private landowners,
Okay.
visiting people at local establishments, if you will.
Right. Okay, thank you
Now,
very much.
I might say, as far as the landscape on where these size projects, the million-square-foot warehouses, we're in a very finite window of opportunity to take advantage of this. COVID changed the shopping habits of America. Your malls, nobody's going to the malls. Nobody's going to the stores other than Home Depot and Lowe's. My wife is guilty of it. She'll hit the submit button instead of going to Macy's. That's the reality right now. So the businesses know they have to build these warehouses, and that's why we're seeing a boom in these warehouses. Amazon is just building everywhere. You're reading about Johnston, Rhode Island, Warwick, Charlton. Serendipity is supposedly a Amazon, 3 million square feet in North Andover, Amazon. I mean, it's just the nature of the beast right now. So there's a finite 2 to 3 year window of opportunity to build these things. We have the availability of land, let's cash in on it.
And
Now, with that
assets.
said, I say there's a 1 year window of opportunity to cash in on the quality merchants out there. You don't want to build a 2 million square foot facility, have it ready, somebody moves in and they go bankrupt in a year because they're not a quality retailer.
Yeah.
There's only a 1 year opportunity to get that quality person in there.
Not to get too heady about it, but we know that interest rates are due to rise as a response to inflation. Marginal retailers and marginal distributors will be primarily impacted by the cost of money. So you got to get the prime clients, and that way they'll stay. That pun was intended, I guess,
Got it. Got it. Yeah,
rather than be speculative.
yeah.
So I'm looking at the budget, the spreadsheet, and under economic development for 2021, total was 5,000. For our current fiscal year, it went up 21,000 because there was a wages segment of 23 and change.
Right.
And then the proposal for next year is only $1,000 left. But what was that 23 and change for wages?
Well, the 23 is going to be higher because town meeting approved increasing
Yeah,
Bob's
but the
hours.
total is going to be down a little bit. But prior to 2022, there was nothing in that line.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It was all volunteer at that point.
Okay. So it looks like the big jump is in our current year. Last fiscal year, we were 5,000. This current year, we're 26,000. And then next year, you're projecting 25 and change, it looks like.
No,
No, it'll be more like 50.
Well, it says 25 here under 2023.
that probably does not include the special town meeting in the fall, so that is now a 30-hour-week position.
That's what I'm
you're
saying.
seeing is.
So you haven't punched that in yet then? Oh, I see, okay. So in terms of what we're presenting to our fellow citizens, it's going to be about $5,000 more than the current year? Or
No, about
25,
30,000 more.
yeah.
So up to 50?
Yeah.
I see, okay, but that's not in here yet. Gotcha, okay. Anybody questions for Bob, you guys on Zoom? Any, I don't know which way I look, but I guess I look at that camera, right? Gene, any comments at this stage of, all right. Robert, anything else for us at this point?
I have nothing. I can live
Okay.
with a $15,000, $20,000 expense budget, as far as consulting, have somebody to lean on.
Okay. So Matt, you're the numbers guy, and so it looks like we're going to ask for 50 for next year, is that right, compared to 25 for now? Everybody understand that,
Yes.
more or less?
Yep.
Comments or questions on that? All right, thanks for coming.
Okay, thank
for
you.
all your
Appreciate
good
it.
work.
Yeah,
I do have a question.
okay, go ahead.
It takes me a couple of minutes to develop it. The 15 you just said at the end, I could use a $15,000 or $20,000 expense budget. Would that be on top of the 50 or within the 50?
There's labor and there's expenses.
It's within the 50.
Within the
to answer your
50.
question.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks,
Sorry.
Bob.
Okay.
Appreciate it. All right, Matt, you're up next. You have an update for us?
Why don't we combine 3 and 4?
Yeah.
You
And
mean
I-
4, 5, 6, 7, and 8?
Well, I don't know there's much to talk about. We really kind of parsed out 5, unless there's questions in the committee.
Yeah, let's
like
do
to-
3 and 4 together, okay?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to be able to share.
By the way, Matt, before you get going, has everybody had a chance to look at SharePoint? Howard, have you?
Thank you.
I don't want to answer that.
Okay. Sandy, have you looked at
Pardon?
SharePoint yet?
I logged in, but that's as far as I got.
Okay.
I was creating an account.
Okay. Carol,
And
how
I
about
didn't-
you? Have you played around with SharePoint
He's so
yet?
far ahead of me.
I didn't see anything on it, though.
I actually uploaded the documents that I emailed.
Oh,
Dick, were you able to see those?
Well, you emailed me
I did, but I uploaded them to SharePoint, and I put a little,
I saw them on the SharePoint stream, but I didn't actually click on them because I got them from you.
I
so.
know. I wanted to test it, and I set up a folder for tonight's meeting with the agenda, the budget, and
Oh, I saw the
when was
agenda.
that? When did we do
last
that?
Thursday.
I saw the agenda.
Okay,
Yeah.
I clicked on that folder. so.
okay, because I didn't see anything. I logged in, but I didn't see
I
anything.
did it last Thursday because I was going to be out, I was expecting to be out because of the storm on Friday, so.
Okay.
Lynn or Phil, have you guys played around with SharePoint yet? Or Heather?
Thank you,
I
Bob.
didn't even see the email, so I have to look in my spam.
You want to take it away there, Matt?
I'm hoping people can hear me. So the computer's over there and the microphone's over here. Every single member of the Finance Committee was given a town Microsoft account,
Yes.
which does cost us money. So if you're absolutely positive you're not going to use it, tell me, because I'll turn it off. But it's $100 a year, so it was $900 for the committee. And it is not just email, and that's kind of what I feel like when I hear people's comments, I want to make sure people understand that when you log into your town account, that's what it is. It's an account, it's a platform that has lots of software and other things associated with it, not just your email address or your email queue. So you're becoming a user in the town, and it allows you to share documents collaboratively with staff that are working on the budget. Because that's the goal, we want to move towards this so we don't use up so much paper. But Microsoft is not famous for making things intuitive and easy. So when you do set up your account and you try to come back into it, you'll have a login. I'm trying to share, guys, but I don't have share rights on this computer in Zoom. So I'm pointing at something you can't see, but there's a home screen. It's some dude sitting with his tablet, and on the left, it'll say hello, and it'll say your name. Welcome back, sign in. And when you sign in, every single Douglas account looks exactly the same. You enter your password, and I can't believe it's going to ask me to remember my password in here. It'll ask you if you want to stay signed in. It doesn't really matter what you answer. And then you come to a screen that looks like this. If you guys have tried it, is this what you've seen? Like a screen with some random documents on it? But what you have to pay attention to is up here on the left. These are all of your tools. They're actually parts of the Office suite of where you're going to work. The T is Teams. That's a video conference platform. You can set up meetings. It syncs to your calendar. It gives you a link. But we're using SharePoint, which is this cloud with the S. My eyes say that's almost like a green color. So you ignore all this claptrap, because if you have an active account, and I have a very active account, everything that everybody sends to me is just scrolling here. It's just showing me what most recently happened on my computer. When I log in the morning, I usually have 40 or 50 new items, but it's not what I'm about. I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click on this tiny little S with the cloud where it says SharePoint. And you guys have been given access, you won't have all these squares, you'll have only one, and it'll say Finance Committee. What SharePoint is a website. It's not in the World Wide Web, it's internal to our town. But we are creating these websites because we can create a user group, so it's basically a listserv. So every time we update something, you'll get an email at your town account that'll say, oh, Gene Lovett just posted the free cash report, or whatever calendaring we do, it'll send you an email, it'll send you a reminder if you want it to, oh, your next meeting of the Finance Committee is 7 o'clock next Tuesday, location, etc. So I have created all these SharePoints for my work, but Finance Committee is the one that I'll click on. There's news, so every single news item that Gene or I especially, or Lisa Freeman would be posting would be in your news. Activity is in every single document that people share back and forth. Click on the actual document, it'll take you there. But over here, on the right-hand side of the screen, it says Documents, and there'll be a list of folders that are labeled. Hopefully they are intuitive labels. Fiscal 22 final special town meeting documents. What we're working on right now is fiscal 23 budget resources, which is this folder here. Click on a folder and you'll see budget documents. Because you have a town account, you have all the software.
Okay.
You don't need to install anything on your computer. You don't need to install Excel, you don't need to install Office. You have it, quote unquote, in the cloud, because that's what the town has bought, a subscription to all of that software. You have it all. So when you open, this is the version of the budget I'm working on right now. It's called Town Administrator Submission. And it has all the spreadsheets that we talk about in these meetings. I'm creating a fill-in-the-blank set of worksheets that are nested so that my department heads can go to their spreadsheet. This is for the police department. Police compensation. They'll come here, they'll enter their roster, they'll enter the person's step and grade, and then everything will automatically populate because I've coded it to do that. It's going to look back to a chart and fill in the salaries. The most important document in this, or tab in this huge spreadsheet, is budget. There's our line-by-line budget. By activity code, it mirrors Gene's general ledger as much as I could. And that's where Phil will see his 7 years of historical numbers. If the numbers are not shaded, it means they are audited numbers. They were, when Gene gets the audited numbers back and gives them to me, I hand code them in. So it goes right down to the penny because that's what we actually spent. I don't do pennies in the budget, but we do pennies in the actuals.
What's the pink color, Matt? I've noticed that in a couple of them.
Because I'm almost blind, I use color as a memory device.
Oh, okay.
If it's blue, it's linked to another spreadsheet somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's not hard-coded as $50,000, what's that, OPEB? On my master scenario spreadsheet, I've got a line for OPEB that I can move up and down because that's a little bit of a plug-and-play number.
Yeah.
If it's pink, it means it's the variable that drives through the spreadsheet.
I see.
So on the scenario sheet is called control panel because when we build models, that's what we do. We have one place where you enter everything that could vary. Because you want to play with scenarios. Well, what if health insurance goes up by 12% and we give everybody a 1% COLA? You make all those choices on one page, this page, and it will filter all the way through the budget, all the way through the analysis. So pink means it's a variable that will drive analysis deeper into the rest of the spreadsheet. If I'm given a number that no formula can explain, like Worcester County will say, this is your number. It does tie back to a percentage, but the percentage is however many digits long. I don't want to know that. Just tell me what I owe you. So we go back to budget. And if it let me scroll up. Last year, the pink with the initials, we were signing off saying, I've reviewed this and this is the final number to give the FinCom.
Yeah, okay, the one with the initials, right.
Yeah. I'm looking for retirement. So this is retirement. See that dark blue? That means that number came from them. I don't want to explain how they did it. It's 9.897 something percent over last year. That number's going to change because that's everybody and it doesn't take water and cable out. So if there's a number I absolutely can't change, it'll be in a very dark color with white font.
So for instance, everybody, when I was saying I saw that economic development was
Right.
26 in pink as MW and then signed, so Matt Wojcik signed it, right? That's what that means? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's when we were wrapping up the budget, it was, all right, everybody go back over your numbers, make sure this is what you want, because that's what's going in the flyer. About a week and a half before we bring it to you guys, and everybody signs off, says that, I agree, that's my budget.
I think what was a little, what threw me for a loop when I first created my account and signed in, I was so focused on this SharePoint that when I logged on and it worked, it was Office 365. And I thought, hold it, where's SharePoint? But SharePoint is within Office 365. So when you do set up your account and you get going, you'll see Office 365. That's correct, but SharePoint will be on the left and then you click it, so.
So going back to your home page,
It's part of Office.
part of Office, the other key icon that you'll see is this blue. It's actually an envelope, I think, and that's Outlook. That's your town email. So we send things to the distribution list, that's where it's going. You can forward your town email to a personal email if you want. If you want that help, please reach out to me or to Lisa, and we'll get the IT guy to set that up for us. So you don't have to keep coming here. I would encourage you, though, to use this, because we paid for it. Yes, Howard?
Yes, I want what you said.
Okay, you want that.
All right, anybody else, questions or comments on SharePoint moving forward? So play around with it, and if you have any questions, call us, I guess.
If we go over here and meetings, over here and play around with it, I don't have to worry about messing anything up.
Because it's not live for
Carol,
her.
I ask that question every day.
So what's the answer?
He says I have to trust him, I'm not sure.
No, I'm trusting you.
So that's the problem, I'm afraid.
Yeah, me too.
No, so when I finish building this out, I will create a password-protected, sequestered spreadsheet that I have version control over, and I'll leave the other one for you to do whatever you want to. Get medieval on it if you want to. You know, we can always reset it, as long as I have one master copy, which I will always have. Yeah.
I'm not gonna try to change anything, but,
Yeah, that's the way to cut the budget right there, Kevin. Just get in there and smash everything up.
I think Matt has the master list, Carol, so I don't think we can do anything to mess that up.
So that's the thing you can't hide. Since I'm the admin, I can see everything everybody does all the time. So if you mess up my spreadsheet, I will figure out who did it.
And he will hunt you down.
Okay, so Matt, will that kind of be your town administrator update to the little SharePoint?
Pretty much. I mean, I just let you know before we get really deep into this, I got a whole bunch of procurements I have to get out the door and resolve.
Okay,
So I'm posting lots of last year's capital budget items for projects. It's a lot of work, but it's got to get done. As soon as that gets done, this will be the only remaining priority. Well, that is all I have. It's
Okay.
getting late. I just,
Update on stone ice.
well, I was going to save that for items not anticipated 48 hours in
Oh, okay.
advance.
All right, we'll save it for that then. So if you look, everybody, on your agenda, I have number 5, discussion concerning overall process. That was only because 2 weeks ago when we were finished, there were some side conversations and a couple loose ends. So I just wondered, does anybody have any questions at this point for Matt, particularly on just the budget process, or everybody good at this point? So I wasn't thinking of anything specifically when I put this in here. It was just, do we need some loose ends we need to wrap up?
I'm good.
Okay, anybody? All right, then we'll carry on. All right, let's look at the meeting minutes of January 11, everyone. You should have those in front of you. They were emailed. Gene, I have a question for you on assessors. Are we still doing the monthly, or might we have somebody coming up in the?
No, we're still doing the monthly.
Okay. And it looks to be that way for the indefinite future?
Matt wanted to wait until after the annual town meeting, right, to see what the compensation chart was before we advertised again.
So at least through May, then? we'll be
I think
doing-
that would be wise.
Okay. All right, any questions on the minutes of January 11, anybody, or corrections?
Motion to approve?
Okay, Phil made a motion to approve as submitted. Somebody want to second that?
Second.
Lynn, thank you. So Phil Landry makes the motion, Lynn Mazzulli to approve. She seconds it. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
I'll abstain.
One abstention, Howard. So the motion carries unanimously with one abstention. Thank you, everybody, for those minutes. All right, Matt, open session, topics not reasonably anticipated.
So late this afternoon, well, I guess it was late this morning, I guess, when I got it. But we've said many times, John Furno and I, that the snow and ice budget is a complicated animal, and that we ask people to remember that you feel the big snowstorm, right, and you hear the guys out there working all night. You know, it's a 48-hour, 72-hour journey for them when they really have a lot of work to do. And that big snowstorm was, $71,000 storm. And the snow and ice budget was, starting position was $218,606. So we spent about a third of it on one big storm. The real story, though, is all the little things. The freezing drizzle, the day that you didn't expect anything to happen, you get a snow squall, and now you got to run out there and put salt down because everybody's slipping and sliding and getting hurt. And there's lots of those little $3,000, $6,000 events. And when you start to add them all up, they add up very quickly. That's one part of the story. The other part of the story, and I hate to admit that I'm a total dork of a geek, and I like this stuff, but the salt market has been a very volatile market. It's got supply chain disruptions like many other industries. It's a commodity that's heavy and bulky to move around. It comes on a ship and it gets offloaded and yada, yada, yada. This year was highly unusual in that usually our bid, we get on with the town of Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury has been the most successful municipal contract, and there's about 15 or 16 communities, quite a few, that join with Shrewsbury. And we have a 66-33% split, so the lowest bidder gets 2/3 of the business, the next lowest bidder gets 1/3. We do that to split it up, keep everybody honest, also to make sure that we have supply, because the lowest bidder is often the biggest entity, but sometimes they have no stock for us, and we got to go out to that second guy, and we have a contract in place. This year, salt was way more expensive than it was last year. So that is another reason why we are here in the early February looking for an increase to snow and ice. The way this works under the statute is I approve it and I give notice to the Finance Committee and to the Board of Selectmen. So I am giving you this notice. I will pass it around, so you have a copy.
We don't vote on this then? Okay. It's just to let us know, kind
And for
of?
the benefit of,
But it will have to be adjusted this spring, right?
yep.
Yeah, we'll put it as a special article.
Yeah.
So for the benefit of those at home that I can't share my screen, it's a very brief memo. This memo is in regards to the snow and ice budget. Currently, we have spent approximately $251,798. I don't know how approximate, it sounds pretty precise to me. $251,798. Our original budget was $218,606. This is John Furno writing. He says, "I would like to ask for an additional $125,000 in snow and ice funds to cover deficit spending and any additional expenses for upcoming storms." So of the 125, just please note that he's really asking for about to cover 37 in deficit that he already had to spend this weekend. His new total for snow and ice, so his cap before he has to come back for further authorization, would be $343,606, which I intend to approve. So you are on notice that that's where we stand with this account. We have been increasing the snow and ice budget every year, incrementally, about $20,000. So that's how we got to 218, and we'll continue this pattern because really, historically, the town spends at least $300,000 a year on snow and ice. So we want to try to get a little bit closer to that so we're not deficit spending. So that's where we will be, 343,606, and hopefully it won't snow again.
Or everybody should just stay home.
Anything else, Matt, under that?
That is all.
Jean, are we pretty well set for who's appearing before us at our next meeting?
I believe I passed out this schedule and I have not made any revisions.
So as far as you know, the people on the schedule know their dates and so on?
They do, although
Okay.
I will be kind enough to remind them.
Okay.
So you have, the next time, Highway Superintendent, so John Furno, Adam Furno, and Justin. We have a full agenda.
Okay. Anybody else? Anything last minute? All
We
right.
need to sign those.
Do we all sign them?
Do we all have to initial those?
Yeah, just whoever's present, if you could. This should be copies.
Okay. Then we can have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Second by anybody? So Sandy Kuiper's moved, we adjourn. Second by
Heather.
Heather. Thank you, Heather.
Heather, that's the first time you spoke all night. Nice job.
Okay.
Y'all answered my question.
You did great.
All right. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.